Hello, everyone, and welcome to another inspiring session of our modulyss Talks. I'm Morgan, your host, and I'm delighted to have you with us today. If this is your first time joining, modulyss Talks is all about informing and inspiring professionals in the architecture and design community. Together, we explore insights, trends, and ideas that help you shape stronger, more thoughtful spaces. And we do it all during your lunch break. Today, we'll explore how the workplace is evolving, with new generations reshaping expectations around comfort, identity, and choice. What does this mean for the spaces we design? And how can material and design decisions support workplaces that are adaptable, human-centered, and ready for the future? To guide us through this conversation, we are joined by Kay Sargent. Kay is Director of Thought Leaderships and Interiors at HOK and a globally recognized voice in workplace strategy and design. With more than 4 decades of experience, Kay brings deep insights into the changing dynamics of the workplace. Her work explores themes such as infused hospitality, balance at work, neuro-inclusive design, and sensory well-being. She is also the author of Designing Neuroinclusive Workplaces. In today's modulyss talk, Kay will translate emerging behavioral shifts into clear design principles for future-ready workspaces. Expect insights that combine strategy with sensitivity and vision with purpose. If you have any questions during the session, please place them in the Q&A box. We will answer them after the talk. At the end of the session, we would also greatly appreciate your feedback. You can access our evaluation form by scanning the QR code on your screen or by using the link shared in the comment section, which we'll share after this talk. Your input helps us improve future modulyss talks and is a chance for you to suggest an expert speaker or a trending topic you would like us to explore. So without further ado, Kay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to kind of walk you guys through what it is that we are seeing as we address different generations, the rapid pace of change, all of those things that we're kind of going through. But I'm going to start with this, that when it comes to the future, there are three types of people. There are those that let it happen. There are those that make it happen, and there are those that wonder what just happened. And I guarantee you do not want to be in that last category. We really want our clients and everyone we're working with to be those that are making it happen. But to do so, that means that you really have to think about what is coming, what are the dynamics at play, and how do we handle those? So I'm going to start with two big shifts that we're really starting to see as our clients are really trying to decide, do we go forward or do we go backwards, right? Everything kind of shifted during the pandemic. And when people are coming back to the office, we're kind of in this world where do we go back to what we used to do or do we move forward? And I'm going to tell you that there really isn't a choice here. You can try to go back to the way things used to be, but things have fundamentally changed. Artificial intelligence, shifting generational needs, all of those things have evolved, and so we do as well. So two of the biggest shifts that we're really starting to see is all this conversation about generations. Well, in all of our research, I'm going to tell you that it's actually more about life stages than about your birth year. When you're in your 20s, every generation was probably pretty progressive and rebellious to some degree. But as you mature, as your life needs change, so do your habits, your priorities, they shift, right? And so as the millennials have aged, we're starting to see that they're starting to have children, they have different priorities, things are different. Right? And so it's not just about the generations. We need to think about those life stages. And two of the things that are happening right now is that we know that the young are guaranteed today to probably live to be the very old. And as we're living older, that means we also are becoming more of a silver society. We can't just look at the generations that are coming in. We have to look at the generations that are going to have to work longer and will probably stay in the workplace for an extended period of time. And that really means also the second shift is that the office is really transforming to be more of a cultural platform. It is not the place that you have to go to work anymore. It's the place that You're bringing your people together. It's a billboard for your company's message. It's creating a sense of purpose and belonging. It is where you are building that culture and kind of transcending all of those challenges that we're having today and really transferring knowledge from one group of individuals to another. And that goes both ways. It is no longer about the older generation mentoring the younger generation. We're talking about cross mentoring today, where the younger generation is coming in with new skill sets that older generation might really need to tap into. And that wisdom that older generation and that experience and being seasoned professionals that older generation has really needs to be able to be transformed and transferred to that younger generation. So creating that cultural platform for all of that to happen is really the purpose of the office today. And so when we think about what's happening, we kind of look at now and then we kind of look at the extended future. Right now, the biggest trends that our clients are talking to us about are authentic experiences, adaptability, infused hospitality, human-centric spaces, regeneration and circularity, health and well-being, technology, purpose, mission, and belonging, the societal shift that we are seeing, and neuroinclusion. So let's just dive in real quickly to some of those, because these are the big things that are really starting to focus on and are changing the way that we're designing. So first, authentic experiences. Experience is about to become one of the most overused words on the planet, right? Because if you are not creating an authentic experience, then it's not a good one. It really has to create a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and it has to talk about your organization's mission and values. The second is adaptability and reuse. There's been this massive flight to quality. We have a lot of buildings that are aging and are really kind of outliving their ability to be able to meet the guidelines and standards that we need. And so we need to really start thinking about adaptive reuse. But we are also in a time now where trade wars, disrupted trade routes, higher cost of material goods. In the last week alone, every single one of those things has been negatively impacted, which means the cost of bills and materials have all just gone up, and the ability to get things has become much more complicated. And so more and more clients are starting to look at how do we reuse and repurpose what we might already have so that we can reduce waste and get things faster. Infusing hospitality is the third. Now, this started way before COVID. We started really addressing this, but COVID put this on steroids because now everybody basically has spent a significant amount of time in their house where they can personalize things, etc. And when you go back to that office, nobody wants that cold, sterile corporate space anymore. They really want spaces that resemble whether it's a hotel lobby or mimic a cafe or have concierge style services, and that really create spaces that feel welcoming, inclusive, and serve as a magnet. Okay, the fourth one is human-centric design. Now, again, this is something that we always should have been doing, but we really need to understand that we are designing for people, and people are different and unique, and we have to address their unique requirements and create spaces where they can truly thrive. The next one is about regeneration and circularity. Okay, David Suzuki just came out and said that the sustainability war is over and we lost. We now cannot just think about sustaining. We have to think about going beyond that. We need to think about how we are regenerating spaces, how we are addressing circularity, and how we're incorporating elements of biophilia into the space. We have to think about human and environmental regeneration and circularity, and how do we really help us all sustain? And that bleeds right into the next one, which is our health and well-being. Again, introducing spaces that are diverse, that are restorative, that enhance our overall physical and emotional abilities and resiliency and our overall well-being. We need to think about technology and how do we integrate that seamlessly into spaces, but also create a balance. It can't necessarily be everywhere, but we want to think about how are we leveraging that intelligently and intentionally to really serve and meet our needs. Purpose, mission, and belonging. This is one of the biggest reasons why you're coming together. 10 years ago, if I went into a bunch of offices, I couldn't tell what kind of business that they did. But today, the office is a billboard for what your company stands for, your values. It is becoming the vital hub of your community. And we also need to think about that societal shift that is underway. The younger generation is facing a different reality than what the older generation did. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. But that means that their priorities are shifting and they don't necessarily want to work harder. They want to work smarter. And we need to think about ways that we can bridge that talent gap. And then, of course, neuroinclusion is a huge issue today because, again, we are not all the same. And we need to design environments where people can actually thrive. You shouldn't be sitting there struggling throughout the day to block out all that sensory overload or be in spaces that are so dull and boring that you just don't feel natural and human in those spaces. We need to think about neurosthetic principles and how are we creating neuroinclusion to really help everyone thrive and improve their cognitive performance. So all of those factors are playing in to how we are designing spaces today. But another new reality is that we are in post-normal times. Everybody keeps saying, okay, is this the new normal? Things are changing so rapidly. I'm not sure we're ever going to really plateau and hit a normal again. Because if you think about this, ChatGPT has only been out for 3 years. And think about how much that has changed our entire world in just that 3-year period. But we can't just look at what's happening now. We have to look at what's on the horizon. And we need to think about what are those next generations and the generations to follow, what are they going to be doing? Because here's the reality. We are not designing spaces for today. We are designing buildings that will stand for 70, 100 plus years. We are designing interior spaces that will be occupied for 5, 10, 15 years. So we need to think about what is on the horizon because we are designing for that. So in our research, we really have kind of bucketed into 5 things that are really truly impacting us today. The first one is kind of social economic factors, societal shifts, globalization and regionalism happening at the same time, cost of living, geopolitical issues, all of those things are impacting and influencing the workplace. Because here's the other reality. When people are asking me what the future of workplace is, I cannot answer that question if I don't know what is happening to work itself and the workforce, because those two things will drive how do we design the workplace. The second bucket is place, right? So the authenticity of it, the new urbanism and commuting, transforming central business districts into social business districts, that aging infrastructure that we're dealing with, commutes, adaptive reuse, all of those things are coming into play. We need to think about how are we thriving and how is our planet thriving? So our physical, mental, cognitive well-being. We need to think about health inequities, climate crisis, regeneration, circularity, and resilience. The fourth bucket is the workforce, people. We have a declining labor rate and a declining labor pool. We need to upskill and retrain. We have generational shifts, diversity and equity, a longevity imperative, and immigration challenges all around the world that are challenging that workforce. And we need to think about technology and how that's impacting it, whether it's the large language models and artificial intelligence, whether it's immersive technology, robotics, smart buildings, security, biotech revolution, all of these factors are influencing us. So today, I'm just going to dive into one of these buckets because we're really talking about the people and the next generations and the generations that we're dealing with and who we're going to have in the workplace as we go forward. So I wanted to share some quick things with you. So first of all, we have, if anybody's ever read The Anxious Generation, it's actually probably one of the most depressing books I've ever read. I can't say I highly recommend it, but it is really informative. And it's basically saying that this generation has been exposed, this younger generation has been exposed to so much information, more information in a day than the older generations probably got an entire lifetime. And that is causing unbelievable emotional distress and uncertainty. We also know that the younger generation is going to be living longer. They say that a child that is born today has a 50% chance of living well into their 100s. And so the young can now expect to become the very old. We know that fewer and fewer people are having children, right? 40 years ago, 60% of 30-year-olds had a child, where today only 27% does. And that is going to fundamentally shift. Do we need single family homes? Do we need as many educational facilities? Is the workforce more nomadic? All of those factors are things we need to be thinking about. We have skill gaps and inequities. We have to think about the fact that now 1 in 6 people is over the age of 60, and we have an aging population. We need to think about that rising inequity, that declining labor force. And again, the fact that as people are living longer and longer, you may not be able to retire after 30 or 40 years. You might have to live and work longer to be able to sustain that. And so a new Stanford study just came out that showed that a 67-year career, not lifespan, career, might become the new normal unless something fundamentally changes. Because again, you cannot live into your 100s if you and work for only 30 years. The math just doesn't play out. And so this is the reality that the younger generation is facing that we need to start thinking differently about. And so we always focus on the technology, and that's important because that's changing rapidly. But we tend to neglect the social factors. So let me just play into some of those social factors real quickly. So again, let's go back to that longevity imperative. The reality and the challenge we are facing today is that there is a radical shift in the human condition that really has never happened before, that the young can now expect to become the very old. That means that you can't wait until you're 50 or 60 to think about your social connections, your financial health, your physical health. You have to fundamentally change the way you live your life, starting in your 60s, so that you can actually sustain for that longer period that you're going to be alive. And so choices are going to have to be made. I think often people look at the younger generation and say, oh, they're lazier, they don't want to work as hard. No, they're dealing with a very different reality. And again, they want to work smarter, not necessarily harder. And they're insisting on that work-life balance for this very reason. If people are living longer, that means you're going to be working longer. So again, that 67 potential year career. But if you think about that, that changes everything, right? For an older generation that used to think, okay, I'm going to work 30 years and then I'm going to retire. Retirement for the younger generation is probably farther off, and they are going to finish their careers in jobs and professions that don't even exist today. So they're going to have to constantly get retrained. So we have to realize that something has to shift. We cannot keep working the way that we are working now if this is the reality that this younger generation is facing. And we are being overwhelmed, that anxious generation, right? We spend most of our days in things like this with hundreds of people, or, at least dozens, staring at us all day, online, being totally overwhelmed. And we are being constantly assaulted by a barrage of information that is coming at us that it also is overwhelming for us. So if we talk about technology and the influence that it is having, we also have this rapid rise of artificial intelligence. Again, ChatGPT has only been around for 3 years. And I love this quote that says, AI will not replace humans, but a human with AI will replace a human without it. This is the new reality that we are all facing. And we have to think, okay, we're kind of being forced into this reality of having to embrace some of this technology, but at the same time, are not necessarily sure where all of that technology is taking us. But what we know right now is that most of us are living with some kind of a digital debt. We are being overwhelmed by disruptions, by phone calls, by messages. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that they don't get enough text messages or Teams invites or things like that. It is a constant barrage. And what's happening now is that people talk about how noise is such an issue. It's actually electronic disruptions that are the biggest issue that people are facing. And on average, people check their inboxes 74 times a day. And that doesn't even include text messages, Teams, all of those other things. So we are constantly kind of being driven by this barrage of information that is coming at us. And what that is doing is it's saluting our mindfulness. Before COVID, about 20 years ago, people had an average attention span of 2.5 minutes. Okay, that's pretty low if you really think about that. But today it is less than a minute. It is continually falling because if we can't digest something very, very quickly, then we can't process it. And what that means is that our brains are kind of staying in the shallows. We're not really focusing on things, and we're not really taking refresh breaks and just having that moment to breathe. Almost anytime you step away from one task, the very first thing you do is pick up your phone. And that's not a break. That's actually just another distraction, right? And the real problem in humanity basically today is that we have Paleolithic emotions, we have medieval institutions, but we have godlike technology. And none of these things are in sync, and it's overwhelming us. And so we have to get back to a moment where we can breathe. And what's really interesting to me is that we're kind of going through this neo-Luddite movement. A lot of the younger generation are saying, enough, enough. Put the phones down. Let's have real interactions. Let's get back to organic experience. There's a rise in the maker movement. People want to be connected with each other. They are seeking out those things because we are out of sync right now, and we need to think about it. And a lot of people envision this as the future of work. Now, this is where I think sci-fi gets it wrong. And almost every science fiction movie, that's any forward thinking, this is the kind of spaces that we're looking at, right? Or if you saw the movie The Passenger, this is what that ship looked like, that, they were all on a mission. But when they arrived, this is what the humans had done to it. Because as people, we don't relate to this. We are not cold, metal, sterile things. We are organic living beings, and we relate to things that are more living. And so we have this whole philosophy around high tech really equals high touch. The more we go in one direction, the more we really want to have high touch things. This is why we have this rise in personalization, stylization, biophilia, authentic things, because we are valuing that. And so when we think about the future of work, it's more things like this that we as humans can relate to. And yes, technology is there, but it's not necessarily front and center. Spaces are being designed for people with natural elements, biophilia, things that give them some kind of relief, because these are the types of spaces that we relate to. But when you think about artificial intelligence, there's a lot of benefit that it can bring. I think we all spend a lot of time, if you think about this, doing things we don't necessarily want to spend our time with. So if you look at this chart, from the top to the bottom, these are the things that we want to spend the most time doing or we enjoy doing. And administrative task falls all the way at the bottom. Yet that's where we spend the majority of our time. And we're spending the least amount of time doing the things that we want to. So if artificial intelligence can come in and help us take care of some of those administrative tasks, well, maybe it frees us up to have a new renaissance, to be able to spend the time doing the things that we actually really value. And there's a lot of dangerous, dirty, and dull jobs that if artificial intelligence can help us with, we need to think about that. Oh, there's so much that's happening right now, and there's so many changes. But if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. And so we really need to think about what is coming. So let me just give you a what if scenario, right? Because all these things are happening, and we just kind of laid out some of this, a small window into what might be coming. What if we acknowledge that work isn't working? And then maybe we need to think about the fact that we need to change a few things. Henry Ford revolutionized manufacturing 100 years ago. So we're going to go back 100 years. And at that time, people were working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And when he introduced the assembly line, he realized that it would reduce production time and increase productivity significantly. And he wanted people to have time off to drive the cars. So he implemented an 8-hour, 5-day a week work schedule. And everybody at that time thought he was crazy when he did that. He did that in 1926, 100 years ago last month. But what he did was he gave something back to society. He realized that he was making plenty of money. They could produce as much in a reduced time, and why not share that with the workers? I want you to look at this chart. So in 1916 or 1965, excuse me, when they introduced the computer, they thought by the year 2000, that red line on this chart, that productivity, the upward movement, would have increased so much that we would only have to work 2 days a week. But that didn't happen because we just took all that added productivity and just kind of put it into steroids, put it into, the corporate profits, and we just kept working as hard as we ever did. Now we are at a point where artificial intelligence is projected to significantly increase productivity. And so the question is, if we can get as much done in 4 days or 3 that we can in 5, who is going to be the Henry Ford of our day that's going to say, you know what, I want to give something back to the workforce because I realize you're not going to work 30 years anymore. You're going to live a lot longer. And so you might want to spread that work life out over time. And we might want to introduce pre-retirement where we have sabbaticals or we have baked in breaks or opportunities for people to kind of take that time rather than wait to the end, but embed that when they need it, when they're having children, when they want to write a book, when they need to go back and get upskilled, when they have an aging parent that they want to take care of. We need to think about how are we addressing that societal shift. And I think right now, I love this quote from Stephen Hawking, that the race is a future between the growing power of technology and the wisdom with which we use it. And how we choose to apply all of that increase in productivity. We need to really rethink things because as we go forward, we don't want to just let it happen. We want to make it happen. We do not want to just wonder what happened. We have a unique opportunity right now. And you could argue that every generation has been faced with innovation and changes and shifts. Yes, the printing press changed the access to information. The car changed transportation. But artificial intelligence is changing every industry at the same time simultaneously. It is a game changer. And we are now looking at having medical advances that are enabling us to live significantly longer than we have ever been able to before. And so those two things coming together mean that we need to rethink the way that we go forward. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a little bit of a conversation, ask some questions, and see if we get some questions from the audience as well.
I'm sorry, I disappeared there for a second. Thank you, Kay, for this amazing talk. It was very interesting, and we still have time for some questions. For the audience, you can still put your questions in the Q&A, so feel free to share them with us. We have already some questions for you, Kay. The first one I want to ask you, I want to jump on the high touch topic that you discussed. So when we talk about cognitive performance across life stages, how critical is like acoustic control on floor level, or what does tactility and material warmth in floor level play in that? What kind of role do they play that in that?
Yeah, so we've done about 10 years of research into neurodiversity, sensory processing, and cognitive well-being. And I will say that the number one complaint that we repeatedly hear is about acoustics. I think a lot of people misunderstand acoustics in some cases. I think in many cases, places are too quiet, and so you can clearly hear that transfer of sound across a space, and that's far more disturbing. But we really need to be thinking about is sound absorption. right? So any kind of soft flooring is going to help with sound absorption. It's going to reduce kind of that click clacking that you might be hearing. It's going to increase the warmth that it might be feeling. But it's also really, really important that we think about the patterning to make sure that it's helping with wayfinding,
Mhm.
not confusing. So that's one of the key elements. But uh, there's been a big increase in the amount of hard flooring that we're starting to see in a lot of spaces. And there's a reason for that, I think, right? Because it used to be it was all carpet everywhere, wall to wall, really. And then they started to introduce more elements. I think flooring can really do an amazing job of helping define spaces. As we sometimes, if we don't have as many walls, a area rug or even a change in carpet pattern or a change in flooring can help distinguish one zone from another. So it can be used very strategically. But going all hard flooring can be problematic, just like going all carpeting can be problematic, right? So we have to think about how are we creating a good variety? How are we leveraging that for acoustics? And how are we leveraging that for wayfinding and defining areas and spaces? And I'm going to just want to say one thing real quick. We've been experimenting a lot with generative AI, and it's pretty amazing what it can create and produce. But where it often totally fails is addressing how a person would actually feel or be in the space. Just look at my background right now, right? Which is probably 100% generated by artificial intelligence. It's very cold, it's very white. The flooring isn't really a great design, very kind of generic, right? And how a person would actually feel in that space. It might look great, but a person would probably feel horrible in that space. And where one of the things we have found repeatedly that artificial intelligence and these generative programs that we're using is failing is with lighting and flooring. So don't just take it and run with it. Like we have to use our critical brains and as designers to say, all right, well, what's really working and how would a person actually feel in that space and how do we make it better?
Okay. And what do you think should be the first um, material or product to discuss when designing a workspace?
Well, I think color is huge. So again, I'm just going to look at our two backgrounds, right?
Mhm.
So mine is very like nowhere in nature is there a rectangular white box, right? And yet we continually put people in that. The space that you're sitting in, your background right now has warm tones, has some texture, has some pattern. That feels much more natural and organic than like this stark, flat, white space. So color and tones and texture are important. And again, this is another area where wall materials and flooring can have a huge impact, right? Just putting in an area rug that kind of defines a space or having a change in that pattern can really help people navigate through a space or understand that there's something. It can ground it. Like if you look, you've got a carpet behind you, like a rug
Mhm.
in your background, right? I don't. And so all that furniture in my background just looks like it's floating in the middle of nothing, where yours actually looks like it belongs. It's sitting on something, it's grounded, and that area is defined. This is a total, we didn't plan this. This is actually a total mistake because I have a bad background. So I put this thing on at the last minute, and this could not have been more brilliant for what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And another question, it's more about the sustainability side of it. Um, so the longevity at work also means durability of materials. How should we rethink life cycle, circularity, and replacement cycles when specifying carpet tiles or broadloom for the next 15 or 20 years?
Yeah, look, I think our entire industry is fundamentally broken. When somebody buys a new house and you're ready to move, I don't know anybody that throws out every single thing that they have, guts the new place they're moving to, rebuilds it, and then buys everything new. Yet for almost every corporate project we do, that's exactly
Mhm.
what they do. And we are throwing out a lot of things that still have a second life. And we need to think about from a sustainability standpoint, from a timing standpoint, from a cost standpoint, that the way we're doing it is not intelligent. And we have to think about that. And so a lot of the products that are being created today have a very long life. And we're thinking about how do we rotate those through. And I love that, like, you guys are amazing at always telling designers and facility managers how to extend the life of their product, rotate things out, like, et cetera, if you can. Almost nobody ever does that. But we need to be smarter about those things, because every time we're not following those directions, it is fundamentally costing us money and putting things in the landfill prematurely. So I think a lot of this is habits. And we also need to think about how are we repurposing things at the end of life. That's really, really critical. And are we making it so it is full circle, right? So that we're reusing, it might be recycled materials that then are going back in, and then, it's like this whole big cycle.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have some case studies to share with us today, like a real life case studies that our listeners, our audience, can look into after this talk, where they can get
Oh,
inspiration from?
yeah, we have hundreds actually. You can go to HOK.com, and you can look up any of the case studies that we've done. You can look up the neurodiversity if you're interested in that. All of the research that we've been doing is published there. We actually even wrote a book last year about designing neuroinclusive workplaces, and there are 4 case studies in there about how we helped our clients address not only human sustainability, but environmental
Hmm.
sustainability, and really kind of addressed thought leadership. But I think one of the ones that I really, really love is in Birmingham in the UK, the project that we did for Arab, where they said they wanted to really be human centric. They wanted to take it from their employees' perspective, and they wanted to create a space where everybody could thrive. And so we worked with their engineers and our design team and really came up with not only sustainable solutions, but solutions that people are thriving in, that is addressing the sensory cognitive loads, that is creating an environment that has options and choice and some level of variety, that someone who wants to sit in a buzzy space can find an area to do that, where someone who
Hmm.
needs, I can't handle that, can also find their needs. Because when we talk about these things, I don't know a single person that isn't impacted by sound, light, temperature, noise, comfort, texture, all of those things. We all are. People that are neurodivergent, though, tend to have a higher sensitivity to that. And what might be annoying to someone that is neurotypical can be debilitating to someone that is neurodivergent.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. And then we have time for one more question from the audience. It's a bit a different question. Stephen Hawking also famously said there were only 2 things he feared for the future of the human race. Number 1 was a large asteroid, and number 2 was autonomous AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I want to end on a positive, but I'm going to tell you I lose sleep over that. Look, when we started to do a lot of the research on artificial intelligence, there was a disconnect. There were a whole lot of people that were really, really optimistic about this, and there were a whole lot of people that were terrified about it. Stephen Hawkins being one that was terrified about it. And what we found is the people that are looking out 5 years were pretty optimistic about some of the things that it could bring. The people that were looking out 40 years were really nervous about it and
Mhm,
thought this was an existential crisis. Um, and I think we are going down a road that we don't necessarily know where it's going to end up. And I think we're making decisions every day that are taking us in the wrong direction, quite frankly. I also think that the people that are optimistic about it are using their human sunny disposition to see everything positive. But there are a lot of nefarious people and a lot of ways that this can be used not for good.
mhm,
And we're putting a whole lot of faith in people using it intelligently. Again, that quote about the wisdom of which they will use it. Um, and I look, I think, 90% of the people on the planet might have good intentions, even if 1% don't. it can cause problems when you're giving
Mhm.
them a really powerful tool. But I think we all need to work every single day to use it intelligently and intentionally and not just fall into, oh, this is easy, I'm going to do it. Think of all the people that gave up their DNA, right? Without thinking about, I literally gave my DNA to a company, or facial recognition that happened overnight without people really understanding what they were doing. We have to be intentional
Mhm.
about this. And the fear is, I think right now, everybody is so afraid they're going to fall behind that they're jumping into things without really understanding the ramifications of it.
Mhm.
So explore, be curious, but be intentional
Mhm.
and be smart about it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Well, I think that's it for the time we have for today. I'd like to thank you, Kay, for this amazing talk. It was very interesting. It taught us a lot. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. This was the first part of our modulyss talks on future ready workspaces. If you haven't already, be sure to sign up for upcoming modulyss talks with Arwa Shaklazi on March 19th and Tim Hatton on April 2nd. Be sure to also fill in our evaluation. I'll share the QR code just in a second. I'll share my screen.
While you're doing that, can I just say that Tim Hatton is going to explore the case study that I referred to for Arup in Birmingham. So if that was intriguing to you, make sure that you catch Tim's talk when he's featured in a few weeks.
So this is the QR code you can scan to go to our evaluation form. If you can't scan the QR code, the link is also in our Q&A box. So yeah, be sure to follow along for our upcoming modulyss talks. Thank you again for listening, and thank you again, Kay, for your talk. We will send you the Q&A after this talk and the recorded version via email, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Bye. Bye.